No audio? Audio? Okay. Hi all. I'm going to be looking at David Bronstein this week in a little bit more detail. Well, actually more examples of sacrificial play. Now, sacrificial play might not be for everyone. You might want to play in quite a riskless way in your chess. You know, this trend for playing solidly, and you might even consider really solid openings and stay away from sacrifices. I mean, it really depends on your playing philosophy. If you enjoy creating works of art potentially, and can take the risk of losing lots of games through unsound sacrifices, then it doesn't really matter. It's not such a risk, is it, if you lose a few trying to play brilliantly. I think most people are not going to become grandmasters or even IMs or even any title, but if they can create these fantastic games, I mean that's quite interesting. And David Bronstein, he had this stated declaration. He got all the way to challenge Mikhail Botvinnik for a World Championship match. And I think he just stated he wanted to show that he wasn't going to lose to Botvinnik, and he achieved that. There might have been some psychological pressure working against him as well. But he was so close to becoming an official World Chess Champion. The upshot of that is that he didn't. That many people are not aware of his brilliance and his games as much as the official World Champions. So currently, actually, there is a Bronstein Memorial tournament on at the moment. So I think his memory still lives on. Let's have a look then at some sacrifices which I haven't covered on the YouTube channel recently. By the way, I hope the audio is okay everywhere. Let's check once more. Okay, so this first game that I want to go over is actually in 1989. So this is quite late on in his career, and it's special for me because he was playing the Lloyds Bank Masters in London, and this was a fantastic tournament. I played in it a few times, and you had a lot of like 2500s coming from the former Soviet Union, and Conquest played David Bronstein in it, so one of the new IMs at the time. He's a grandmaster now. Let's flip the board. So how was David Bronstein going to fare against this international master? Was he going to be able to play dynamic chess? So we saw e4, and Bronstein replied with the Caro-Kann defense, which has a reputation of being quite solid. c4, a good system against the Caro-Kann. d5. Now white tries to be often annoying in this system to try and hold on to an extra pawn on d5. White took on d5 and played e takes d5. So temporarily, okay, it's double pawns, but sometimes it is quite difficult for black to get the pawn back. Knight f6, knight c3. g6. Kind of not being too worried about taking on d5 at the moment. Bishop c4, bishop g7. Knight ge7. White's playing in a kind of materialistic way. The knight hasn't even been deployed to f3. The intentions are clear for doing this, or can be, that white intends maybe to support this pawn, to hold on to it for dear life. But with the knight being deployed here, theoretically instead of here, just imagine there's a point to having a knight on f3. It defends h2. So white's kingside might be a bit more vulnerable later on in this game. Both sides for the moment now castle, and now knight a6, as though there's an interest in playing either knight b4 or knight c7 to try and get this pawn back. d4, and actually we see knight c7, and white tries to hold on to it. Materialistic play. Can it be punished? Well, white also has a bind on the b5 square at the moment. It's difficult to play for b5. We see actually b6 as though, well, bishop b7. We're going to gang up on the pawn again. Or maybe we in fact might be interested in a6 and b5 later. a4 just clamping down here just in case. Bishop b7. And now queen b3. Look at all of this. All of these pieces being used up to make sure David Bronstein is not going to get the pawn back. Rook b8. As though there's a sniff of an x-ray attack on the queen if this bishop moves. Maybe later a6 supported by the knight and b5 to try and undermine this materialistic construction here. Bishop e3. In fact, a6 is played here. As if the queen takes, well, we've got bishop takes d5. Rook fc1. And interestingly now, a move which does have some concessions. g5 weakens the king's side a little bit, weakens some light squares. It looks a bit of a risky move to play. Knight fe2, and now the g5 pawn hanging is protected. And white actually tries to undermine g5 now by playing h4. Black now lashes out with an energetic b5. A takes, bishop d3. And now with the queen there, it's actually a tactical target to this rook. b4. So if the queen takes, well, bishop takes d5 looks quite nice. White plays actually h takes g5 in this position, hitting the knight. hg5, and now knight a4. Isn't this c5 square quite painful for black? But now black can comfortably take on d5. Knight c takes d5, offering actually the g5 pawn now instead. So after all that, black is still a pawn down. So what has he got here? Well, let's see. Queen d6. And now, okay, it looks as though with queen d6 the dark squares might be a concern, like f4. The knight's kind of tied down surely. But also immediately h2 now is also eyed. So knight g4 looks like, even though white's a pawn up, this knight g4 looks stronger than it should be because the knight is here, it's not there. And we see now, what does white do in this position? I mean, knight c5 might be quite harmless. Maybe we can just retreat the bishop potentially. White plays knight g3, and now we have knight g4 anyway. The knight was blocking that diagonal, so why is knight g4 being played? Well, d4 is a bit loose. And I think this is a system as black against Caro-Kann, which David Bronstein has had, experience of this, and d4 being trouble. I think actually there was a timed game or two, including games against Mikhail. I think one of them might have been in this opening. But anyway, so d4 is actually under fire here. White now plays bishop e2, attacking the knight. Now it's David Bronstein. Does he move knights away from g4? Does he retreat them back? No, not really. Can you guess what he played in this position? If I give you 20 seconds starting from now. So black to play. What do you think black played here? Anyone? Any ideas? Alright, I'm going to show you. Okay. I hope you got it. So black just played knight takes f2. There's a loose knight here potentially. This bishop d4 looks dangerous for white's king safety. If king takes f2, and now I regret not engine checking this game actually, I think bishop takes d4 looks incredibly dangerous. One idea might be, I mean one of many ideas, might be to try and blunt the queen's protection of g3. So maybe a move like knight c3 could be useful, just to play queen takes g3 next, and it's very dangerous after that. I imagine this is a very dangerous obstruction tactic. If b takes, actually we're pinning against the queen here as well. The queen's loose, so this looks fairly dangerous as one example, but there might be something more incisive. Really, I should have engine checked this game, that's for sure. I'm just improvising here. Bronstein was also, by the way, called an improviser sometimes. He would play openings and just make up completely new systems at the board. Very, very creative. So anyway, so knight takes f2. Given this state of affairs with bishop d4, white actually played queen f3. And now bishop takes d4. It looks quite vicious. I think black's got compensation now for his sacrificed pawn earlier. The knight's on the rim here. This g-file, is it dangerous for black's king or for white's king? Which way is this road going to go? White plays knight f5. And now knight g4 check, offering the bishop here, because the queen can pop into h2, for example. Let's have a quick look. Knight takes d4, queen h2, and this looks quite trivial, a mate. So actually, after this knight g4 discovered check, white played king f1, and now we see knight h2 winning the queen, and it's going to be with check, an added bonus because our queen's attacked here. So white actually resigned. So it's quite crushing, you know, king e1, knight takes his check, quite crushing. And that would be pretty bad. I think queen e5 check if we want to try and pick up this knight here. So anyway, what a crushing game, and it shows, you know, that Bronstein, even at this stage of his life, 1989, you know, he could play very dynamic attacking chess. And actually, one of my good friends, Paul Georgiou, actually got to play him and was lucky enough to win against David Bronstein. Paul Georgiou won against David Bronstein in a brilliant game, which I'm not going to show you. I'm just going to focus on other games instead, actually. So now let's have a look at I'm hoping I haven't shown you this on the channel. It's from this start position, and this is a bit of a departure from my usual streams. I usually don't go straight to start positions, but let's do that here, because I had this as a hangover from a video recently on the channel. So white to play black to play in this particular position. David Bronstein is playing against Boris Yakovlevich Ratner in the USSR Championship of 1945. So the USSR Championships were of much greater significance than more localized ones, much more prestigious. King G8 was played here. And can you guess what white played in this position? If I give you 10 seconds starting, sorry, not 10 seconds, 20 seconds starting from now. So white to play in this position. Do you know what white plays here? No, it's white to play. Okay, I'll show you. It's knight takes e6. And the point here is that if f takes, then rook takes d7 is very unfortunate for black here. Knight takes, queen takes is actually picking up the knight. What is there in terms of defense? You might ask, well, queen f7. Queen f7 actually fells here, pardon me, to a tactic. Can you guess what tactic this would fell to try and protect the knight? White to play, And I think it's very insightful, to be honest, when I'm reading David Bronstein's books. I pay particular attention to his comments about these combinations and what they actually celebrated. I'll use that comment as a kind of clue. You're celebrating the pressure, he called it, on the H file in this position. That's really what's being celebrated. So what move here can destroy black in this position if I give you 20 seconds here, starting from now? Okay, yeah, the queen is a bit vulnerable to rook h8 check, trying to deflect the king away from the queen. And if king g7, rook h7, and we're going to win that queen, we're going to win everything. So that's not possible to do this. So black actually played rook takes d1, giving up his queen. After rook takes h1 here, just king takes, rook takes, queen e7. The queen is more than a match for the rook and knight. This pawn's dropping. You know, if rook b8, queen c7, king g7, just giving up the pawn, knight c8, and after queen d7, black resigned. He's material down, and white has, you know, 3-1 pawn majority here to start advancing. Okay. Let me take you to Moscow. I keep saying Moscow nowadays. I don't know why that is. Now this intrigued me, this position here. David Bronstein is playing against Ludek Pashman. Actually, I've got a middle game book by Pashman. He was a good writer as well. So David Bronstein, if you haven't got the Sorcerer's Apprentice book, I think it's one of the best books in chess literature, as well as Zurich 1953. Zurich 1953 showed very early King's Indian defences, some of the dynamics. Now here, the dynamics for me are very, very interesting because the power of the exchange sacrifice, in particular a rook for the bishop, is very important, I think, to conceptualize what on earth is happening when you give up a rook for a bishop. And I've really tried to focus on this recently, what really happens. And I think this example shows some evidential mechanics. If white plays bishop takes d5 check here, it doesn't give black that many problems. Well, there might be a few, but it's not that many to solve. Because what have we done? We haven't really celebrated this diagonal, have we? And when you take out the opponent's bishop, in general terms, it's like the opponent now is weaker on the light squares if it was a light square bishop, or the dark squares if it's a dark square bishop. So what do you think white actually plays instead of bishop takes d5 here? Okay, I've given you a bit of a clue. So I'm going to carry on to show you. White plays rook takes d5. He's trying to keep this pressure on this diagonal. Keeping this bishop is far more important. Trying to knock out this guy is just far too dangerous if black took. You can see evidence that clearly all the light squares like f7, they're being celebrated. It's horrible. You know, we can knock out the rook, etc. In fact, it works the other way, this position as well, that if the inferior bishop takes d5 is played, do you know what black can do in this position? So it's actually worse than actual David Bronstein's own annotations for this position, because you can engine check all this stuff. What can black play here which is really strong? If I gave you 20 seconds here. if white had played this, black can actually play an exchange sack of his own. Rook takes d5, and it leaves white sort of damaged on the light squares without the light square bishop. And the pin can be celebrated here with, say, queen e7. This is a strong engine move, actually, hitting the knight. If the knight goes back, now knight d4 is a bit of a bone-crushing move, hitting the queen using the pin. And if the queen, for example, goes now to e4, then you see queen f7, and you start to appreciate what an exchange sacrifice does. Black's much stronger all of a sudden on the light squares. It's no coincidence. All of these tactics are disastrous on the light squares now for white, or near disastrous. After rook takes d4, you could even play e takes d4. That's good, because at this point you don't even have to sort of win the queen. It shows that the exchange sacrifice has the effect of leaving you stronger potentially on a certain colour complex than the opponent, especially if you take out the opponent's bishop. So anyway, rook takes d5, and the game continued. King h8, rook takes d8, rook takes d8. And this bishop's beautiful on this diagonal. Why on earth would you want to get rid of this bishop? It's the coordination of the pieces which really comes to the fore. Queen h3, threatening mate. h5. And that beautiful bishop is supporting knight f7 check. King h7. Rook e1. The game continues a bit. Rook d2. Knight g5. King h8. Bishop e6, which, you know, it's going to be crumbling to take this. You know, taking this, it'll be crumbling. Knight e7. Queen e3 hitting the rook moves. Knight f7 check. Playing with the king. Knight g takes e5. It's an overwhelming concentration of forces around the king. Rook takes e3. Knight g5. Knight ef7. Playing with the king a little bit. Knight gf7 again. Now, actually here, maybe that was gaining a bit of time for the move 40 time control. So he's past the time control now. It's move 42 now. He plays actually queen f4, and here black resigned. This is now actually indicating that I think a queen invasion is imminent. So the point is, anyway, that the positional point of the exchange, and you can see it working both ways, that it's such a huge mistake, in fact, for bishop d5. The normal move is a huge mistake because it allows an exchange sack, and the best move happens to be an exchange sack. The point is the coordination on your remaining material. That's what it provides. The value of the piece is not in isolation, and this is something I think Bronstein himself emphasised. It's the rest of the material, how they work as a team after. And it sometimes makes such sacrifices really logical to get the rest of the team working very well together. So let's now go to Moscow 1946 against Alexander Kotov, who wrote a book which I think is highly controversial because it kind of tried to reduce chess to a sort of form of bean counting. It was called Think Like a Grandmaster. But I guess it did have some valuable concepts like candidate moves, but I don't think it should be taken too literally. So anyway, Kotov is under great pressure here on his king side. It's clear he's under great pressure. He plays knight d7, perhaps only factoring in one combinatory idea, when there's actually a much simpler one in a way. Can you guess what white played in this position? So David Bronstein playing white against Kotov, the Russian Championship in Moscow 1946. White to play here. What would you play in this position? If I give you 20 seconds starting from now. Any ideas? Okay. Vikos1 has mentioned something. Okay. Well, now I believe Kotov may have been thinking about queen takes g7. I don't think queen takes g7 does much. I think we can take here, and we can try and eliminate this pesky knight to make bishop f6 working with knight f5. It doesn't quite work. E takes, rook takes, trying to get into bishop f6. Queen c6 protecting f6. Bishop takes d7. And this does look dangerous, but I think it's okay actually for black. No, what was played instead wasn't the queen sacrifice. It was actually bishop h6. Not like that. The queen sacrifice like this. So if bishop f6, we just play bishop takes g7 check here. Now if the queen is taken, bishop takes g7, and black actually resigned here because king g8, it's much clearer cut. This is a mating. It was a cute little combination, but to be fair, it was a position, you know, much better for white. So there should be a combination that exists to be able to do something with this fantastic position against the king. It's just not, queen g7 doesn't seem to do that much as just bishop h6. You know, if rook g8, bishop g7, there's no real defense, it seems, to bishop h6. Okay, so let's now go to Geller, another great player, FM Geller. David Bronstein was white against Geller, and it seems black's trying to do something on the queen side against c3 here. I mean, this came from a Nimzo Indian defense, but white has this gazing rook on the 7th rank, and when this happens there can be a lot of magic that results when you've got a gazing rook like this along the king's safety. It reduces king's safety basically as a general rule, you know, if there's a rook like this. So I think combinations are more likely to occur. White presses on with the kingside attack with g5, and black now is in difficulties. He tried, he didn't want to move this knight particularly. I don't think it helps matters. He played actually d takes e3, and we see g takes f6, and black's idea was rook takes c3, and it looks like a strong passed pawn. To be fair, it looks like a lot of pressure, but there's a real crunching move which just emphasizes black's not going to be given time at all for this. Can you see what white played in this position? You can say that the king's safety was compromised with the rook on the 7th already, but what does white concretely play here if I give you 20 seconds starting from now? Any ideas? Any ideas for white to play here? Can you guess it? There's a great move here, celebrating the 7th rank. Okay, yep, queen g6. Look at this 7th rank. g7 focal point. After fg, we have Rook takes G7 check, and mating next move. You know, if here, mate. If King F8, Knight G6. Just shows magic can happen. If you've got a Rook on the 7th, this is really dangerous stuff. So Queen G6, a crunching blow. Black has to resign here, really. This mate threat, there's no checks or anything. There's nothing black can do here. White's threatening Queen G7. Let's go to the Moscow Mathematics Institute game in 1963. Oh, this is a funny one. Actually, this was on the channel. I think this is possibly the earliest game against a computer. So David Bronstein was playing against the M20 computer. Might have been even weaker than a VIC-20. It was in the Mathematics Institute in 1963. So computer technology for chess hadn't been much evolved. They were a kind of caricature of themselves nowadays, very materialistic. And the computer took on F1, and Bronstein just let the computer have a munch here. He played Knight E4, so his knight's going to head to that F6 square. The computer came back for more material. Didn't really have any concept about king safety, and the search depth is very low as well. So Knight F6 check, King E7, and David Bronstein offered the computer even more material. Bishop D2. Black took on C2. After King F2, Black helped itself to the Rook. But now the punishment for all this materialism. Knight D5 check, King E6. Queen C4 threatening double check and discovered check. B5. Knight takes G5 check, dragging the queen away from C7. Queen takes. Knight takes C7, double check. King E7. Knight D5 check. King E6. And the amusing thing here is this diagonal is kind of opened up with these seesaw checks. Knight takes F4 check. Knight D5 check. We've opened this diagonal. The king now goes to E8. Pretty hopeless position. Queen takes C8, Queen D8. Check. 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 And the final checkmate here, Queen E8, checkmate. This was from a King's Gambit, by the way. So it was quite nice. It was I think one of the earliest recorded, computer crushes. So yeah, the computer's gone materialistically insane, just forgetting about king safety and just taking all these bits. 1 point about if the king had stepped forward here, I'm just wondering actually what white would play here. I think the point is check, and then bishop takes G5 check. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that one. So now let's go to Budapest in Hungary. So in 1949, if I can get it, 1949. Now Bronstein was playing black, and I think I should note about Gideon Boxer, and this shows actually that I think Bronstein is my cup of tea. He talks about, this is in the 40s, 50s. He talks about playing endless 3-minute chess with Gideon Boxer. They were good friends. They went to the chess club early and played hundreds of 3-minute games. You would think a serious player like David Bronstein, who was a world championship contender, wouldn't touch blitz chess. He did, and so did Mikhail. And you start to realise a lot of these dynamic, brilliant players actually really enjoyed playing blitz chess. Anyway, so that was a side note. So anyway, against Gideon Boxer, Gideon plays Queen E4, and there's a really crunching move in this position for black. Can you guess what black played here if I give you 20 seconds starting from now? So black to play. Any ideas? So black's play here. Has anyone got an idea for this position? Okay, I'm going to have to show you now. I hope you got it. Black actually exploits white's queen's a little bit loose. Knight takes d3. And the point here is the power of intermediate moves, that you don't have to automatically recapture. Because after queen takes f5, white maybe he was expecting a recapture, but we don't have to. There's no legal obligation to recapture. And in fact, knight takes e1 is now threatening to mate white. That was what was played. Knight takes e1. Winning material. There's no useful check here. We can't attack the rook. You know, because it's even a double check. If we try to deflect the rook, well, it doesn't even matter because it's double check, you know, in any case. And checkmate. The knight's actually even stopping the king coming to h2. So the queen actually, the king went to f1 here. Knight c2 check, bishop c1, and you might think, well, hold on, if king e2, I think there's knight d4 check. We don't want to lose the knight after, and we can just be a piece up like that. So bishop's c1, and now another intermediate bishop. Oh, sorry, rook takes c1. And now another one, knight d4 check. And actually, there's a bit of a concern about rook at the end of this. So yet another intermediate check move. And now we're going to just be loads of material up. We can just take the queen, not even losing the rook. So this shows you that, you know, you can't rely on automatic recapture sequences. When the queen came back here, knight takes d3. Yeah, this is pretty vicious. Okay, so let's go to another game in Budapest, actually, Hungary. If I can load it. Let's try again. Oh, this might be the position. White's got a few problems here. Playing white is Joseph Zilly. I think the S is silent. S-Z-I-L-Y. Now, if white plays knight takes d7, then actually we don't recapture. We play bishop b4, kind of skewering the queen to the king. And there's nothing black can do that. So white decided got to get his king into safety. So white castled. And can you see there's a really devastating tactic here that black played? Well, it looks kind of as though white's asking for it anyway. So black to play, what does black play in this position? if I give you 20 seconds starting from now. So black to play. Any ideas? Black to play. Okay, I'm going to show you now. Yeah, just shreds open the king, because actually this knight's loose. So for example, if takes, we've got check, and then we can hit the knight. There's at least 2 targets here with queen h5. So we're going to come in for a kill here if this pawn drops. So at minimum we can just take. Whoa! Pardon me. Let's run through that again. Check, queen h5, and then we can just take here. So we've still got loads of pressure with queen f3. So in the game, actually, after this, white tried to minimize the damage with knight g3, but now we get queen g6, g takes, bishop takes g3. It's just far too dangerous to take this. You know, white's at minimum is perpetual, but actually black's going to play rook f3 and it's over. So white actually played king h1, queen h5, and now black kind of crashes through with rook f3 anyway in this position. Rook takes, queen takes. Now the knight's taken, and just needs to get the rook in. So horrible threats, or even here. And queen e1 was tried. Check. Rook f6, getting the rook in like this. Doesn't matter white's bishop up. His king's just torn to shreds. Check. And actually mate here. It's nice checkmate here. Yeah, that just shows white was in big trouble in this position. This pawn structure looks very aggressive for black, eyeing at the king side anyway. It looks totally logical. There's no major. The visual signs are just clearly there that something would work. There's also this loose piece to factor in. Now let's go a game against Paul Kaz in 1950. This is quite interesting. I think Kaz put the potential for a blunder, you know, like Magnus Carlsen did against Nakamura, a potential for a blunder, because Kaz played on in this position. It looks terminal, basically, this pawn. It looks terminal for Paul Kaz playing black. The king looks as though it's on its last legs. But black tried something which I thought initially this might be too trivial to mention, but then I thought, hold on, if this wasn't played correctly, this could really mess up here. I'll give you an example. So queen c2, what do you play with white here? If I gave you 20 seconds to play this position as white, what would you play here? So you want to try and win this game, this position, as professionally as possible without any counterplay, without any issues, without any fuss. What would you play as white? Okay, I'm just a bit concerned that it's winning in all cases, but I just want to show you an example. If Rook F1, I mean, it looks as though Queen H6 might be sorry, on the cards, but Queen D2 might be a pain. I think that's the point I want to point out. This might be a pain to White. You know, if Rook, you know, we take the Queen. If Queen H6, yeah, we just play Rook G8, and I don't think this works now because we've always got Rook H6, and that's the end of the fun. So to try to finish this position in a professional manner, you've got this position, and actually the professional way to finish this is not, I think, to allow Queen D2. I think that's my main point. You don't want to allow Queen D2. So actually White just plays Queen H6. Forget. You know, let the Queen take. Yeah? King H2. Now after Rook G8, Rook H4 is winning, and also I think this works as well, doesn't it? If we want a Queen sack. But it just shows the difference. This position, I think it's easy to let this pesky Queen do some damage with Queen D2. You don't really want to allow that. I think that's professionalism in the attack. To play Queen H6 here. Not a Rook move. Don't give the opponent any chance whatsoever. So, okay, so Mikhail Botvinnik against David Bronstein from the World Championship match, which Botvinnik seemed to win mostly on adjournments with his huge teams available in very simplified positions, and he couldn't even beat David Bronstein in the World Championship match, and in fact in one game he got completely destroyed. So black here, the White's king has already been compromised. Botvinnik's king side has already been compromised. So actually there's a lot of winning moves. This is such a fantastic position. Centralization is massive for black. Okay, there might be a slight issue about Queen F6. It's not a big deal. Black now, you know, wants to dominate all the light squares, so a virtual exchange sack with Rook E4. Sorry, White played in this position Rook C2. White played Rook C2, and now Black played Rook E4, hitting the Queen and offering, you know, get rid of this bishop. So White took that. His king's just in big trouble. Check. And he gives up the Queen. This isn't good enough. After knight F5, Queen B4, takes, check, and he could get a pair of rooks off. King H3, Queen F2, King G4, and now F6, and actually Black's got a really nasty threat here of H5 check to win the knight on F5. So the knight can't move because we're going to win the rook. So yeah, that was, I think that was an experiment in the opening, to be fair to Botvinnik, that backfired to reach this horrible position with the white pieces. He had done some sort of pawn sacrifice which didn't quite work out at all well. Black actually has a number of winning moves, which is why I didn't really want to ask you what you'd play here with Black. But I think Rook E4 is quite pretty. It's this idea that, you know, you can sacrifice the exchange and you can weaken your opponent on light squares. But it is quite a crushing position in any case. So Rook E4, key move. That's a World Championship game. Game 11, 1951. There's another very, very strong position which could have been won in multiple ways in that same World Championship of 1951. David Bronstein's done all the positional legwork here. Black, Mikhail Botvinnik is struggling here. He plays Queen G8, and there's a neat reply. In fact, engines suggest White has two other really good moves as well. This is just such a strong position to have. Black is actually kind of fatally weakened on his dart squares in particular, and this rook going across the 7th rank is always bad news for king safety. Can you guess what white played in this position? It's so neat, I think I will ask. If I gave you 20 seconds here, what would you play with white in this position? So your queen is attacked. White to play. Any ideas? What would you play as white? Very, very strong position already. White's a pawn down, okay, but positionally, you know, this rook on the 7th, the dart squares, it's really crushing position. But bishop g3 was played. So the beautiful thing here is if bishop takes, then we just use this diagonal with queen b2 check, mating. If queen takes b3, then bishop takes e5, rook g7, and this kind of check here is mating. So this is quite a nifty move. Bishop g3. Black played bishop g7. And now actually just queen takes was played, because actually we've also got this rook on the end here. We can just take the rook. So black resigned. So bishop g3, really a crushing move. The engine suggests it's a really strong position, by the way. A move like queen c2 is also strong. It's just that if the bishop's exchanged off, but anyway, this is the most pretty, I think, from a human point of view. Okay, let's have a look in the Ussr Championship of 1963. So this dumbfounds engines completely. So Stefan Broska was playing white against David Bronstein, and had just played rook takes d5, and it looks as though white has a complete fortress. And you can put this into Houdini at depth 24, 25, and Houdini will not find a way, in a meaningful way, to cause white any danger whatsoever in this position. Because it's a fortress. This position is a fortress. White is the exchange down, but what does black do? There's amazing thing that black does to change the fact that it's a fortress, which I think engines might appreciate much later in analysis. Someone has confirmed this might actually be winning from an otherwise position which an engine is not going to do anything here, and it's just going to carry on forever with a theoretical advantage. So can you guess what black played in this position? So David Bronstein playing black. He's the exchange up. What does he play? 20 seconds. Any ideas? He sacrifices an entire rook. Rook takes b3. One point is if a takes, then A2 is actually a better rook and pawn ending, because this position, these pawns are quite vulnerable. This apparently this is okay for black. White plays king takes b3, and we have check, check, rook e2, and these pawns are still really vulnerable on dark squares, away from the colour of the bishop actually, and they start dropping off. Rook takes e3, check, and now this one. So now we've got two passed pawns here. Bishop c2, d5, rook b1, d4, bishop d1, rook c3, check, and this is pretty bad here. I think when I was checking it, rook d3 might have been a wise idea, because these pawns are advancing quite dangerously. Instead, white takes on a3, a bit greedy, and it allows this pawn to advance now. So we've got this armada of pawns, and the game continued. Check. So white's a bishop up, but these passed pawns are just huge. The king's coming in. Check. We can even lose the c1, the c pawn. Check. Two passed pawns is enough. King g1, e2, queening, and white resigned. It was a breakthrough, and if you put that position into an engine, I think you'll be surprised. The engine won't come up with this move, and it will just carry on with a theoretical advantage forever, because it's a fortress position. So that's one for checking with an engine. This rook takes b3. Lev Polgiavsky against David Bronstein now. In the Ussr Championship, Leningrad, 1971. White just played queen g5. And there's a remarkable tactic here. Quite deep. I don't know, deep forcing moves, a bit of calculation maybe. Can you see what black played in this position? If I give you 20 seconds starting from now, black to play here. Okay, I'm going to show you actually. It looks as though if we knock out this pawn, f3 is a bit weak, but surely, you know, the bishop is protecting f3. The thing is, there's another side effect here, that if bishop takes, we just take that, and we actually just exploit the loose rooks pedantically with queen d3. Winning material. So that's a bit of a pain. White plays bishop g2 and he's just lost the centre pawn. It's pretty bad. Bishop d3, e4, and locking in this bishop now. It's not nice. Queen d7. Black's position is easier to play. It takes out that knight. The dark square bishop looks to have a good time here, winning the exchange. So the exchange up, the game continued a little bit longer. Yeah, it continued for a bit. But it's the exchange up really. And here white resigned. So anyway, the key thing I think about this game was this tactic, this neat little tactic, bishop takes e2. I thought that was quite neat. Let's go to Reykjavik in Iceland, 1990, for the last example of Botvinnik's Botvinnik's, Bronstein's brilliance. Bronstein is playing against Walter Brown and had this specially prepared, something special for Walter Brown, who played the Sicilian defence. And this whole variation, I think, gained popularity even more after. White prepared this pawn sacrifice for the opening, razor shot opening. So Walter Brown, US Grandmaster, he took that pawn, knight e5, and all this was in preparation, getting to this position. Bronstein had this back at his hotel room, this position, up to some way in. And I think here had prepared this pawn sack h4. So another pawn sack. And the idea is check. On d6 dropping. It looks pretty painful. Queen f8. Queen h2, gaining a lot of loose pieces to attack as well. Bishop takes f5. Queen takes e5. Queen e7. White takes on e7. Rook c6. Rook hc8. Rook b6. Rook takes c3 was played. E takes f5, sacrificing the exchange, but it's actually no, not sacrificing the exchange, pardon me, what am I talking about? No, E takes f5 was played. It's opposite coloured bishops now, and this sometimes favours the attacking player. Bishop d3, bishop c5, takes on g6, a4 gives his king some air. f6 is there's horrible threats here. Now black sacrifices exchange temporarily. Rook takes d3. Check. King h8. But white doesn't take the rook. White just plays the more crushing move, rook h1. He's just going for the king here. This pawn is a great attacking piece. So anyway, this is as late as 1990. It shows, you know, David Bronstein was playing fantastic chess against grandmasters. Here, Walter Brown resigned. I think there had been this reputation that you shouldn't play into Walter Brown's Sicilian defence, but David Bronstein had this prepared, this whole very, very dangerous line with this f5. And a lot of that was prepared, not so much improvised in this particular example. So, okay, I've run out of my examples in reserve. So, oh, actually, there was one more. Whoops. Just one more. The one last one to show you. David Bronstein playing black. After Queen e2, he's played this very sharp line. He's got this like G-file pressure. And this queen's blockading the pawn at the moment. Can you guess what black to played in this position? If I give you 20 seconds starting from now. So black to play a really crushing move here against Nikolai Bakulin. So Kiev, Russia, 1965. Any ideas? Okay, it's wonderful stuff. Okay, bishop d3, getting the queen out of the way of the blockade. And now, not e2, because I think knight e3 might be okay, blocking g1. No, not. So instead, rook g1 check, drag and drop tactic, getting the king to g1 for e2 check. Knight e3. Rook takes e3. Horrible for white now. Check. Check. Discovered check. King h1. Queen f2. Threatening mate here. And also threatening queen f1. And also threatening queen takes e1. So this is hopeless for white. If queen takes h3, he resigned here, white resigned here. If queen takes h3, queen takes e1, and we're kind of winning loads of material, or just mating, I think. No, this rook's pinned. Well, we're going to, well, for example, just like that, you know, we can queen with check. So I thought that was quite neat. That celebrates pressure down a file. Look at this pressure, how it translates. How it translates here with these sacrifices. The pressure on the G file. I can't do my diagonals. Bishop d3, rook g1. Spectacular. e2 check. Then this discovery check mechanism. Blocking the check with a discovered check. Then this final queen infiltration. And if rook takes e2, by the way, then queen f1 is checkmate. So anyway, yeah, I thought these were quite interesting. Hope you enjoyed that. Okay, comments or questions on YouTube. See you next week. Thanks very much.